I'm Evelyn. Standing in the community hall on my wedding day, I watched as my father stepped up to the microphone, a folded piece of paper in his hand. He smiled at his golf buddies, the same smile he wore when about to tell a joke he found funny. Little did he know that this would be the moment everything changed. The room fell silent as he began to speak. Raise your glass to the daughter who finally found someone desperate enough to marry her. The words hit me like a ton of bricks. For years, I had given my parents the benefit of the doubt, but in that instant, I knew it was over. Let me take you back to how we got here. I work in event planning for a local business, handling everything from charity galas to retirement parties. It's a job that requires attention to detail, and I'm pretty good at it. I planned my own wedding with the same meticulousness, using spreadsheets and cross-referencing vendor contracts. I met my fiancé, Ethan, at a charity gala. He came alone, standing at the coffee station, watching the room like a man lost in his thoughts. I was dealing with a seating issue at the time. Mrs. Thompson was supposed to be at table 9, but her ex-husband had RSVP'd late and ended up at table 8. I spent minutes redoing place cards in the hallway behind the kitchen. When I returned, Ethan was waiting near the dais. You moved Mrs. Thompson. That was kind, he said. I told him it was just paperwork, but he insisted it was more. We went for coffee the next Saturday at the Morning Star Diner. He ordered black coffee and a bagel, while I had a latte and a muffin. He asked me questions, not the typical small talk ones, but the kind that showed he really wanted to listen. By our 5th date, I told him about my parents. My mother, Helen, is a very controlling woman. She's involved in the local community center's event committee and loves to be in charge. My father, Richard, is a bit more laid back but always takes my mother's side. I described them in a calm voice, stating the facts without getting emotional. Ethan just listened, sipping his coffee until I was done. I notice you don't laugh at jokes you don't find funny. That's rare, he said. I told him it was a survival skill, and he replied that it was a virtue. One Sunday dinner, about 6 months before the wedding, stands out in my memory. My mother served a roast chicken that was overcooked. Ethan had been coming to these dinners for a few weeks, but my mother kept acting like she wasn't sure if he was part of the family. My sister, Lily, was there with her husband, Tom, and their kids. Aunt Grace drove up from her antique shop. My mother told a story about me when I was a child. It was one of those stories that made me look bad, and she ended it with, "Oh, but Evelyn was always more of a daydreamer than a doer." Ethan didn't laugh. He just kept eating. After dinner, as Ethan drove me home, he said, "Your aunt was watching your mother all night, like she was waiting for something." I admitted that I had noticed too. A few weeks later, my mother did something that made me realize how far she would go. She waited for Ethan by his car after a Sunday dinner. I was inside helping clean up. She told him about my so-called episodes, saying I was fragile and that she and my father had protected me a lot. Ethan, being the smart man he is, wrote down the whole conversation, time-stamped and verbatim, and saved it to his cloud. Ethan proposed to me on a sunny morning in March. I was in the kitchen making pancakes, and he just blurted out, "I want to do this with you. Forever. Will you?" I said yes, of course. We called my parents, and there was an awkward silence on the other end. Then my mother said, "Are you sure he wants this, sweetie?" My father just said they'd have to do something. 2 weeks after the engagement, Ethan showed me a folder full of evidence. There were emails from my mother to his mother, talking about my supposed hard road and the need for him to know what he was getting into. There were also texts where my mother tried to bribe Ethan to break up with me, offering him $50,000. We decided not to confront them right away. We would let them come to the wedding and wait for the right moment. My mother insisted on helping with the wedding, so I gave her small tasks like making favor bags and coordinating thank you notes. But she didn't stop there. She started making calls to the venue, the caterer, and the florist, who happened to be Aunt Grace. Aunt Grace called me, sounding worried. My mother had asked if I could reschedule the wedding because of family stress. I told her no. My bridal shower was a disaster. My mother gave a toast that was more of an insult. I noticed my cousin whispering to another cousin, and my sister, Lily, disappeared into the kitchen. When I followed her, she was crying. She told me that my mother had told her husband that she had postpartum problems, even though she hadn't been pregnant in years. Aunt Grace then invited me to lunch. At her house, she showed me an envelope that my mother had given her years ago. It was a letter declining a job offer from a well-known company. The signature on it was similar to mine, but I had never written it. I realized that my mother had been sabotaging my opportunities for years. Ethan and I gathered more evidence. We had texts, emails, and even a witness, an old HR director named Ms. Jenkins, who remembered me from the job application. We put together a 6-minute video that would expose my parents' actions. 3 weeks before the wedding, we sat down with Aunt Grace and planned our strategy. We decided to load the video onto the venue's projector and give the remote to the wedding coordinator, Sarah. If I touched the back of my hair behind my left ear during the toasts, Sarah would dim the lights and play the video. The night before the wedding, I got a voicemail from my father. He said he wanted to talk to Ethan man to man before the ceremony. I was so angry and confused. Ethan found me sitting on the marble floor of the hotel bathroom, and he offered to leave right then and get married at the courthouse. But I knew we had to face this. On the wedding day, everything seemed to be going well at first. My sister, Lily, wore a sage green dress instead of the cream one my mother had chosen. Aunt Grace gave me a cameo that had belonged to our grandmother. Ethan's mother brought me tea and told me how happy they were to have me in the family. My mother showed up with a kit of makeup, but when she saw the cameo and the look on our faces, she seemed to understand that things had changed. 40 minutes before the ceremony, she came back with a box of chocolates and gave me a hug. But as she hugged me, she stole an envelope from my clutch. The envelope was a decoy, and I knew she would try to destroy it. Sure enough, a few minutes later, there was a faint smell of paper smoke in the women's bathroom. My mother thought she had one, but we were ready. Back in the community hall, after the salad was served, it was time for the toasts. Ethan's father gave a warm and funny toast. Then Lily stood up. She said that for years, she thought I was the wandering one, but now she realized that she had been following our mother's expectations. She said she was proud of me and sorry for not saying it enough. Just as she sat down, my father stood up. He tapped his glass with a fork and started his speech. That's when I touched the back of my hair. Sarah walked over to Ethan and dimmed the lights. The video started playing on the screen behind the head table. It showed the security footage of my parents trying to bribe Ethan, the texts and emails from my mother, and Aunt Grace reading the forged letter. Ms. Jenkins was on a Zoom call, explaining how she had been confused about my non-response to the job offer. The room was in shock. My mother tried to speak, saying it was a misunderstanding, but nobody believed her. My parents stood up and walked out of the hall. The door closed behind them with a soft click, and I knew that a chapter in my life had ended. After the video ended, I took the microphone. I thanked everyone for being there and said that the wedding was still on. People started to clap, and the party continued. 3 months after the wedding, I got a call from the company that had sent the job offer years ago. Ms. Jenkins had given them the original file and a letter from the pastor, and they offered me the job. Ethan and I moved to a new city, and we have a small house with a garden. I still get letters from my mother, but I put them in a folder labeled "Not Today." I know that the wounds will take time to heal, but I'm finally free from the shadow of my parents' manipulation. And I'm grateful for Ethan, who stood by me through it all.